In 1921, 5 people stepped onto a frozen island at the edge of the world. 2 years later, only one walked off, and it was the person no one expected to survive. She couldn't hunt. She was terrified of polar bears. The men had tied her to a flagpole and mocked her weakness. But when the ice claimed them one by one, something inside this frightened young mother transformed. What happened during those 700 days of darkness? Why did the trained explorers vanish while the seamstress lived? And what did she become out there, alone in a place where even hope freezes solid? This is the story they didn't want you to hear, because the woman who survived was never supposed to be the hero. In 1921, a terrified young mother stepped onto a ship bound for one of Earth's most unforgiving places. She wasn't an explorer. She wasn't seeking glory. Ada Blackjack was desperate enough to sail toward an island that would become her prison, her proving ground, and nearly her grave. What happened next would test the absolute limits of human endurance. Abandoned on a barren Arctic island, watching companions vanish into the ice, Ada would be forced to become someone she never imagined she could be. This is the story of how a woman who was afraid of her own shadow learned to stare down polar bears, and how the same people who dismissed her as weak would owe their knowledge of the expedition's fate entirely to her refusal to die. Ada Blackjack's story begins not with adventure, but with survival of a different kind. Born in 1898 on Alaska's Seward Peninsula, she entered a world where the margin for error was measured in degrees below zero. Her childhood was marked by loss. Her father died when she was young, and her mother, unable to care for her daughters, sent Ada to live with Methodist missionaries in Nome. At the mission, Ada learned to read, write, and speak English. She learned to cook and clean for white households. She became an expert seamstress, a skill that would later save her life. But there was something crucial she didn't learn: the traditional indigenous skills that kept people alive in the Arctic. She never learned to hunt, trap, or build shelter. She never learned to read ice or track game. At 16, Ada married Jack Blackjack, a hunter and dog sled driver. The marriage was a nightmare. He beat her. He starved her. Finally, he abandoned her entirely. Of the 3 children Ada bore, 2 died. The one who survived, Bennett, was sick with tuberculosis, a disease that was slowly stealing his breath, his strength, his future. After Jack left, Ada walked miles back to Nome with Bennett, sometimes carrying the boy when his small legs gave out. She took whatever work she could find, scraping together pennies while watching her son fade. When she could no longer afford his care, she made the most painful decision a mother can make. She placed him in the Jesse Lee Home for Children and promised herself it would be temporary. In 1921, Ada heard about an Arctic expedition that needed a seamstress. The pay was $50 a month, more money than she'd ever imagined earning in Nome. She didn't sign up for adventure. She signed up because she needed to buy her son a future. The expedition was the brainchild of Vilhjalmur Stephenson, a charismatic explorer who had a dangerous habit of calling the far north the friendly Arctic, as if a place of months-long darkness and killing cold could be tamed by optimism. Stephenson wanted to claim Wrangel Island for Canada and the British Empire, planting people there long enough to establish sovereignty. He recruited 4 young men for the venture. Alan Crawford, 20, from Toronto, would serve as the official leader. Fred Maurer, 28, from Ohio, had been north before and carried the complicated hunger of someone drawn back to a place that had nearly killed him. Milton Gall, 19, from Texas, was cheerful and eager to prove himself. Lorne Knight, 28, from Oregon, was confident in a way that could be either useful or fatal. None of this mattered much to Ada. She was thinking about Bennett's thin chest rising and falling. She was thinking about $50 a month. She was thinking about a future that didn't end in an orphanage. But Ada hesitated. She was terrified of wild animals, especially polar bears. Wrangel Island was known as a place of bears. When she voiced her fears, she was told that other native families would be joining the expedition, that she wouldn't be the only woman, that she would have familiar voices around her. That promise was a lie. When the departure day came, the promised families never showed. Locals who understood ice and seasons had looked at the expedition's thin supplies and late timing and wanted no part of it. On the dock, Ada stood alone. For a moment, she tried to withdraw. Then the men assured her they would recruit families in Siberia on the way. Ada's need, and perhaps her faith in other people's reassurances, pushed her forward. She had also sought spiritual advice, and the warning she received was grim. Yes, she would sail, but there would be death and danger ahead, knives and fire. Ada went anyway. There's a kind of courage that doesn't feel like bravery in the moment. It feels like necessity. On September 9th, 1921, Ada and the 4 men left Nome aboard a schooner, along with a kitten named Vic, an absurd comfort in a landscape that would soon feel like the end of the world. The route included a stop at East Cape in Siberia, where the men hoped to hire Inuit help and secure an umiak, a traditional skin boat essential for hunting seals and walrus. They failed at both. The people they needed didn't come. They bought a heavy wooden dory instead, a poor substitute, and continued on with optimism patched over a growing list of problems. When Wrangel Island finally appeared through the Arctic haze, it looked less like opportunity than like a verdict. They landed in mid-September, raised a British flag, and watched their ship pull away. Ada felt something in her chest loosen and tighten at the same time. Part of her wanted to run after it. Part of her understood that she had already crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The men turned to building camp. Ada turned away to hide her tears. The expedition settled into a brutal routine. Ada worked constantly, cooking, cleaning, mending, sewing new garment from skins, scraping hides, keeping the camp functional. The men trapped foxes and hunted when they could, though their skill with firearms was uneven. In the evenings, there were moments of lightness. Alan's bad jokes, Lorne's invented poems, Ada singing hymns, Milton typing away, Vic the cat threading through their legs. But isolation makes its own weather. Within weeks, Ada's homesickness deepened into something darker. She cried often, sometimes uncontrollably, thinking about Bennett until the thought hurt. The men, young and restless, didn't understand her grief. They teased her. They distrusted her. When she refused to patch a pair of boots, Lorne tied her to a flagpole until she agreed. It wasn't discipline. It was humiliation, a demonstration of power that told Ada exactly where she stood in their private hierarchy. Then the bears came. One night while the men were out, Ada heard heavy footsteps outside the tent, sniffing, snorting, breathing. The intimate sounds of a predator deciding if you were food. Ada stayed motionless in the dark, the fire dying, cold soaking into her. When Milton returned and shot the bear, he found Ada huddled in terror, her face rigid with exhaustion. As winter tightened its grip, their stores dwindled faster than planned. The men had arrived with limited supplies, confident they could supplement by hunting. Sometimes they did. Sometimes they didn't. Darkness settled over the island for months, and the human mind, never designed for endless night, began to fray. Then came the first betrayal. The relief ship did not arrive in 1922. Stephenson had secured a schooner to bring supplies, reinforcements, and letters from home. The ship tried to reach Wrangel Island and failed, turned back by brutal ice conditions. Ada and the men watched the horizon day after day. By mid-September, they knew there would be no ship. Their 6 months of groceries were gone. They would have to live entirely on what they could kill. The winter of 1922-23 was subtractive. It stripped away comforts first, coffee, tobacco, potatoes, and then stripped away strength. Signs of scurvy began to appear. Gums swelled and softened. Teeth loosened. Joints ached. Exhaustion became permanent. The only defense was fresh, raw meat, the blood and organs that carried vitamin C in small, vital amounts. In January 1923, the men attempted to cross the sea ice to Siberia to reach a wireless station and summon rescue. The sled was overloaded. The dogs weakened and struggled. Pressure ridges rose like walls of broken ice. After 2 weeks of misery and little progress, they returned to camp, beaten and discouraged. Then came the decision that would seal Ada's fate. 3 men would go, and 2 would stay behind. Lauren Knight was too sick with scurvy to travel. Ada, still terrified of ice and bears, still lacking traditional hunting training, was left with him. On January 29, 1923, Alan Crawford, Fred Maurer, and Milton Gall left with the sled and dogs. Ada watched them go until the white distance swallowed their bodies. They promised they would return quickly with help. They never came back. The day after they left, a fierce wind rose. Ada and Lauren rationed their remaining bread, 6 small pieces a day, and waited for spring. Their survival depended on meat. Their survival depended increasingly on Ada. Lauren's condition worsened. He passed out while chopping wood, and Ada dragged him back to shelter, thinking he might already be dead. His teeth loosened. His gums became spongy. Dark spots appeared on his body. Pain flared at night until sleep became impossible. Ada took on all the chores of camp while still afraid to carry a rifle. At first, she carried only a snow knife, a thin blade that offered more comfort than real defense. But hunger pushed her outward. When she caught her first fox, she brought it back with fierce pride. Fresh meat was calories. It was medicine. Lauren, weakened and irritable, criticized her constantly. He called her lazy, stupid, thoughtless. Ada snapped back. Sometimes Lauren accused her of starving him. Ada's reply was simple. She was starving too. Then something changed. It wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was a gradual hardening, a shift from panic to procedure. Ada began to learn the island by repetition, by paying attention, by accepting that no one else would do it for her. She trapped more effectively. She learned to kill what she caught quickly. She began to practice with a rifle, setting up targets, forcing her hands to stop trembling. One day, she shot a bird out of the air and brought it down cleanly. The act was small against the scale of the Arctic, but it was huge inside her. It meant she was no longer waiting to be rescued by other people's competence. Spring returned reluctantly. Birds came back. Eggs appeared. Ada gathered what she could. She built a platform above camp to scan for bears and ships. She worked on building a boat from wood and skins because a boat meant access to seals and walrus. When the wind destroyed her first attempt, she started again. She did not have the luxury of quitting. Lauren Knight died in late June 1923. Ada built a crude barrier around his body to keep animals away. She was now alone with Vic the cat, the last small witness to 2 years of misjudgment and endurance. Ada watched the horizon because hope is stubborn even when it becomes painful. She hunted. She gathered eggs. She killed her first seal. She kept working because the alternative was a second winter alone, and she did not know if her strength would stretch that far. In August, fog rolled in heavy. Then Ada heard a distant rumble, at first easy to mistake for walrus. She climbed to her lookout and raised her field glasses. The fog thinned just enough to reveal a mast. Ada ran for the beach, splashing into the surf, ready to swim if she had to. She expected to see Alan, Fred, and Milton step down from the deck, grinning and alive. Instead, a stranger approached, Harold Noyce, sent north to retrieve what was left of Stephenson's venture. Ada asked where the men were. Noyce had no answer. He had expected to find them all. When Ada understood that she was the last one alive, her strength finally broke through the shell she'd built around it. She collapsed on the shore and wept. Back in Nome and farther south, Ada's survival became a story people wanted to use. Newspapers praised her as a female castaway, a northern Robinson Crusoe. Then came uglier accusations that she had let Lauren Knight starve. The charge was fueled by fragments of complaint and the ease with which a poor indigenous woman could be blamed for a white man's death. Ada defended herself quietly and firmly. The accusation was eventually withdrawn, but suspicion lingered. She was not paid everything she had been promised. Others profited from the tale more than she did. But she had survived, and survival was not the end of her aim. It was the means. She used what money she could to reunite with Bennett and seek better care for him. Her life continued, full of work and struggle and ordinary complications, as if 2 years on Wrangel Island were simply another scar she carried. Ada lived into old age and returned to Alaska. She died in 1983 at 85, far from the wind-scoured beach where she had once run toward a ship in fog. After her death, Alaska's legislature issued a recognition of her courage, a small token for a woman whose bravery had gone unnoticed for years. If you strip her story down to its bones, it's easy to make it sound like simple triumph. One woman outlasting 4 men in the Arctic. But that version misses what really happened. Ada was not sent north because anyone believed she would become a legend. She was sent because her sewing could keep other people alive, and because her poverty left her little room to refuse. She arrived without the hunting training her ancestors would have considered essential. She was mocked, mistreated, humiliated. She watched men make bad decisions with confidence. She watched promised help fail to appear. She watched scurvy dismantle a strong body. She watched 3 men vanish in a sea ice and never return. And then she did what the Arctic forces on people when it has stripped them of every other option. She adapted. She learned to hunt because hunger was not negotiable. She learned to shoot because fear did not feed you. She learned to work through sickness because nobody else would do the work. She learned to keep going after death because stopping was the same as dying. She survived not by clean cinematic courage, but by relentless, exhausting persistence, the kind that rarely looks heroic from the inside. When Ada was asked later what kept her alive, she spoke of her son. She had to live for him. It wasn't a line meant for drama. It was the most practical truth she knew. In the Arctic, love can be a tool as real as a rifle or a trapline. It can keep your hands moving when your mind tells you to lie down. It can make you stand up one more time in a world that is perfectly content to watch you fall. Wrangel Island took nearly everything from Ada Blackjack. It did not take her will.